Okay, we're live, and and okay. Well, I guess give it about 5 minutes. Excuse me, everybody. We're having our usual technical issues getting started. But Vanita, I guess give it about 5 minutes and try your email because you should have gotten two emails from me. And just keep refreshing the email and refreshing um, your home page until you see the words join the Hangout. Okay. All right. But yeah, call me back, like in maybe 10 minutes if you haven't gotten in. Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I was on the phone with Vanita, one of our regular members, and she's having a hard time getting in tonight. Um, I also have not heard from Labib, who is, I think a regular member, at least the last couple of weeks, and he said he's coming tonight. So I don't know if he's having trouble getting in as well. Um, but anyway, I'd like to go ahead and start on time, um, just because if anyone happens to be watching on YouTube, we've advertised that it's going to start at 6:30, and I want them to have some idea of um, what the holdup is getting started, even if it means we end up running um, a few minutes over. That was me talking the whole time, so I guess I'm off kilter already. Randie and I were just talking about how last week was so strange. It was hot and the subject matter had her out of sorts, and Benita didn't feel well, and she was out of sorts, and I was getting frustrated with all of these technical problems, and I was out of sorts, and only Georgette and Levine were calm, cool, and collected.
We have our turn. Don't worry.
You have your turn. All right. Well, you can have your turn tonight if you want it, because I've had enough.
Okay.
So, but once again, we're having technical issues. Now, I just saw somebody show up. Is that you, Benita?
No, this is Joelle.
Yes.
Joel?
Yes. How y'all doing?
Hi.
Oh, hi, Joel.
How you doing?
We don't have a picture of you.
Is that right?
Yeah, well, you're just like a little blue man.
Uh, I, I see my.
All right. Well, I'm gonna be pressing you to update your Google Plus profile so you have a picture there, so
Oh,
we
just
can
make sure his
see
video
you.
was his camera's.
Huh?
Well, I'm checking my camera now and see if it'll work.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
it's probably me on the operator error, but they tell me I got a face made for radio anyway. So,
Yeah.
so you might be.
Well. Thank you for joining us. We're kind of moving slow, waiting on a couple of other friends that have been regular members who I think are. One of them I know is having a hard time getting in. How did you get in tonight?
Well, it's been a couple of weeks, but I'm a Facebook fan with Georgette, and I saw a couple of things that y'all were talking about, and that's when I started wanting to join.
Oh, all right. Well, we are glad to have you. Um, all right. Let's see. let's go ahead and do our introductions. My name is Michelle Odom. I'm one of the co-hosts of the National Black Feminist Book Group. We started the book group on June 3rd, and we're now, on the other side of the curve. We're down to our last four meetings. So, one of the things I wanted to do with the introductions tonight, because we've had a really consistent group, is have people give their name and answer the question or complete the sentence. I think you should join the National Black Feminist Book Group because dot dot dot. Um, so I'm going to let other people answer before I give an answer. Randie, do you want to go first with your introduction?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Randie Henderson. I am a BWB intern and member, and I am watching and joining the book group from Atlanta, Georgia. I think people should join the National Black Feminist Book Group because there is a lot of raw, heartfelt discussions that I think everybody could use throughout the week if you aren't in a stimulating environment that allows you to have these type of discussions. And in my opinion, we've been focusing on literature that we don't really have access to in school or in everyday life unless you know that it's there and you look for it.
Okay, thank you. Georgette?
My name is Georgette Moses. I'm watching from Columbia, South Carolina. And I think you should join the National Black Feminist Book Group because there are some interesting topics discussed that will massage your brain, cause you to research your history and other people's history, and possibly change some things you thought in the past.
Joel, we can see you now.
I told you. How y'all?
Wonderful. Hi.
Hi.
Are you ready to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Joel Jones. I'm from a little town called Hamlet, North Carolina, via military. I live in Charleston, South Carolina, and I like to learn. So therefore, this is why I joined the group because, like the young lady said, I want my brain massaged, and I'm a seeker of knowledge, just not American knowledge, but world knowledge, and knowledge is universal.
Well, welcome. You're down there in Georgette's territory. You're in South Carolina, right, Georgette?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Um, all right. Well, uh, I should also say that I'm a member and on staff with Black Women's Blueprint. We're based in Brooklyn, New York, and I think that, well, I have to tell a little story. A young man walked in here last night, and he started chatting with me. And he told me that he's 25 years old and he grew up in a well-to-do, predominantly white neighborhood of Long Island, and he's a Nigerian American. And he was in search of his roots. He was here actually to take a class that someone else facilitates here. And so I asked him if he was a feminist, and he said no, not exactly, but that he has five sisters and is very sympathetic toward women. And he asked me if I knew any good books he could read. So, of course, I invited him to join the book group, and which he did, and hopefully we will see him at some point soon. So, I don't know. I think that you should join the National Black Feminist Book Group because um, there need to be places where we can process together um, the very difficult and painful experiences that we have as women, as Black people in America. For example, last week, Randie, Randie, you've been on my heart all week because I know that the reading really kind of got to you
Yeah.
um, last week. The book that we're reading, have you had a chance to pick up the book yet, Joel?
No, ma'am. I've just been reading you all's questions.
Okay,
And,
good. Yeah, and the thing about this book is the chapters are pretty self-contained, so it's not like a novel. You don't really need to know what happened in the previous chapter to catch up with what's happening in the current chapter. But our notes are pretty good, and if you kind of follow that, you can still um, follow the conversation, I think. Um, but mostly, the book has a lot of stories about rape and lynching and castration and, really um, executions, just really horrific kinds of things that have been a real part of our history in this country. And to some extent, our current reality. Um, and it's 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 hard to read about. Which is why I think a lot of people um, don't even want to know much about Black history. Don't even want to go see movies like 12 Years a Slave because it's painful stuff. Um, but I think when you have other people to process it with, you can hear how different people deal with our realities. So that's a very long-winded way of why I think people should join this book group and others like it. Um, the title, the book is At the Dark End of the Street, Black Women, Rape and Resistance, A New History of the Civil Rights Movement, from Rosa Parks to the Rise of Black Power, um, by Danielle McGuire. And tonight, we started on June 3rd. This session one will end on July 29th. So we're coming on down the road. And tonight we're on chapter 5, which is called It Was Like All of Us Had Been Raped. So we still don't have Vanita or Labib with us, but as always, I think we should keep moving with the hope that they will join us when they can. Um, does that sound right to you all?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Joel, Randie, wave your hand or something. That's Randie. Randie's the other co-host of the book group, but we have been taking turns writing the summaries and facilitating the meeting. So tonight it just happens to be my turn. Um, so I think I will start off reading the summary that's at the top of the notes. In chapter 5, It Was Like All of Us Had Been Raped, McGuire explores how a personal situation, rape, was used to advance various political agendas and sparked student activism. By comparison, in the last chapter, she looked at the opposite phenomena, how a political decision, Brown v. Board of Education, led to personal attacks in the form of rape, castration, and lynching. This chapter is primarily focused on events in Tallahassee, Florida during the middle of 1959. Highlights include the Tallahassee, Florida bus boycott, which was started May 26, 1956, the gang rape of Betty Jean Owens, who was a student at FAMU, Florida A&M University, by four white men in Tallahassee on May 2nd, 1959. The way in which students reacted to Owens's rape, extensive efforts to protect white womanhood, including the example of the lynching of Matt Charles Parker in Poplarville, Mississippi on May 4th, 1959, Florida's lynching record, which led the nation, reactions to the grand jury trial of May 6, 1959, and the June 12th, 1959 trial of the rapists Patrick Scarborough, David Beagles, Ollie Stoutenmeyer, and William Ted Collinsworth, whom ultimately received life sentences but not the death penalty. The way a personal event was politicized by people with alternative agendas and worldviews, and the student activism of the era, including sit-ins and freedom rides of 1960 and 61. Okay, so does somebody want to go ahead and start reading the first 3 points? What I did was I had so many questions that came out of this chapter that I ended up highlighting the questions that I really hope we can get to. So if someone would read the first 3 points, that would be great.
I'll do it.
Okay.
The chapter first point. Chapter 1 begins with the detailed description of events on May 2nd, 1959 in Tallahassee. David Beagles, Ollie Stoutenmeyer, and William Ted Collinsworth made a pact to go out and get a nigga girl to have an all-night party. The selected person was Betty Jean Owens, a student of Florida A&M University. They attended a ball earlier in the evening. The four white men approached the park student armed with shotguns and switchblades. Ms. Butterfield were ordered to leave the scene. Betty Jean Owens, however, was trapped. She endured a night of terror and brutality as the heartless white men raped her 7 times. Similar situations in other southern towns had often left African Americans without police aid. Nevertheless, Owen's friends reported the kidnapping to the police. Fortunately, on this question you highlighted was in his first experience with our group, Labib Hamid talked about how the role of the black man as a protector of the black women has been eradicated by our experience on these shores. Looking at the kidnapping of Betty Jean Owens from a feminist perspective, do you think it was the job of these young men, Richard Brown and Thomas Butterfield, to protect the young women, Betty Jean Owens and Edna Richardson?
Hold on, Vanita. I'm sorry, Randie. I lost track because Vanita's on the phone.
Okay.
You finished the reading?
Yeah, I just asked the question too. The question you highlighted.
Okay. Will you facilitate for a few minutes?
Georgette or
Okay.
Joelle, do you want to answer the first question?
Okay, I'll start it. Well, I think these young men, they were just as much as Betty Owens and Edna Richardson. because they were unarmed and they were facing four men with guns and switchblades. You know, it was it, besides just being, you know, just the act of they're going out. These white guys were going out to grab a woman, a black woman. You know, it was habitual. It was part of their culture of intimidation to, you know, keep everyone in a state of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and also I think just the act of going out and you think, and not that I can imagine what's in the mind of a rapist, but they've done it so many times and their culture is really, you know, the community, the white community accepts it, you know, they get a slap on the wrist if they're even brought, you know, before the courts.
Mm-hmm.
It's low risk and they get a high reward because they get points, I guess, with the rest of the guys because they've committed this, you know, this crime, and it is a crime. And they've reasserted their power. They've expressed some anger, you know, whatever they felt about, you know, in retaliation for Brown versus the Board of Education, perhaps, or maybe even just something local that was going on in the community, and also their sexuality. They want to have sex with a black woman. So I the part about where the bee talked about their, you know, the black man as protector of the black woman. That's a hot topic, and I can't touch that right now.
Joelle?
I believe that I agree with what Georgette just said. What I read about the rape in Tallahassee was I like to take things and take it out of um, a racial context, and I put it, you know, I flip flop from the other perspective. You know, what if these had been two Hispanic or Pacific Asian or uh, or black men that perpetrated the same crime on the on white people? When you look at, you know, what could these young men have done with people that are armed, and this is just a violent act in itself. You know, as far as uh, have you know, since we've been on these shores, have our role to protect black women, you know, has it been, you know, because of slavery, has it been reduced? Well, it has, but the African American race is a resilient one, which we all know is how we got this far in the first place. And whatever we do for each other, we understand. You know, we understand what has happened is about power, it's about violence, you know, of your oppressor. You know, you overcome that, you know, by surviving the way that we have always survived. So even though this is a power trick that they try, because, you know, rape is about power. It's more about power than it's about, you know, sex in itself. So whatever they they wanted to, whatever they want to do as far as the power is concerned, whether, you know, whether the white man, whether the black man, whether the white man, whether it was anyone, it's more about the power than anything else.
Thank you. Um, so, in my opinion, I think that going to the police as a group um, to look for Betty was a act of protection and was an act of resistance, even though they knew that the police officers probably wouldn't search for the men and probably wouldn't indict the four men, but they did. And so in that case, I don't think there was anything the black men could do, like Georgette said earlier. The white men were armed. They had guns and a switchblade, and the black men could have tried to overcome them, but they would have been killed in the process. And I think that's the reality, and we can't ignore that reality, even if we did want the black men to stand up and take like active action against the four white men. And on top of that, they were also outnumbered. There are two black men to four white men, and that's never good. And I think that in the end, what was done was really the best they could do, especially in a community where police don't care.
Hmm. But, Randy, of course, you know I want a quick summary of everybody's responses.
Oh, you were on mute. You want everybody to just go down and tell you?
Yeah, unless you can do it.
Georgette. Basically, well, I fed off of what Georgette said. Basically, about the community and what these the boys and the girls couldn't really do anything else. Joelle brought up how rape is not a form of it's just not about sex, it's about power, and how I can't really remember, Joelle, what that point was. I'm sorry.
Probably was probably no point at all, but
Huh?
but so probably because there was no point at all. But I
Oh.
just basically piggyback what Georgette had said, and basically, what are they to do? The only thing that they could have really done was to lay down their lives. Somebody got to be left to tell the story. When somebody have guns and you're a child, and the rest of them are grown men, and they got shotguns, switchblades, four against, you know, the only thing you can do at that point is to throw your body at them, and what good would that do? So I think a lot of times we look at who's going to be the protector. Are you feeding your family by standing up to the white man and get fired, or are you being the protector by standing up for your rights? Or are you sucking it up, being a man, and take those things that come to you so you can push your family further on down the road? And at this point, what they did the right thing. They uh, they basically retreated and fought another way, and that was a smart thing to do instead of throwing their bodies into the bullets.
Right, right.
Right. In the last chapter, it did say the author pointed out that sometimes protection to be protected you had to be silent, and I think the boys hiding and waiting for the truck to leave before they made a move was smart, and they just had to be quiet enough, long enough to wait for them to start heading out. It's a shame that Betty was still raped in the process, but she was also outnumbered. But I think that them trying to help her and look for her was a big deal.
Hmm. Georgette, did you have anything to add?
No, that was good
Okay.
summation. All of everything I thought too.
Okay. Thank you. Georgette, you want to read the next section?
Okay. This is Tallahassee, Florida. Bus boycott started May 26, 1956. Students react to Owen's rape. Many of the students at FAMU were villains of the student-led bus boycott started on May 26, 1956, in Tallahassee under the mentorship of C.K. Steele. They took the rape of Betty Jean Owens very seriously. They also took it personally. It was like all of us had been raped, said student activist Patricia Stevens Dew. A small group planned an armed march to City Hall, but were persuaded out of this approach to protecting black womanhood. Instead, 1,500 students filled the school auditorium on hearing the news of the rape and arrest. They decided to petition authorities for a speedy and impartial trial. More than 1,000 students gathered the next day with signs, hymns, and prayers aimed at the national meeting. And the
Let's
question,
let's skip that question and come back to it if we have time at the end. Okay.
okay.
Okay. Joe, do you have the notes? Joe.
Now,
Do you have the notes?
Yes, ma'am. I'm looking at it now.
Do you want to read the next point, 6 and 7?
Okay. Hold on one second here. Let me see. Can I get to it? 6 and 7. Protecting white womanhood, lynching of Mac Charles Parker, Poplarville, Mississippi, May the 4th, 1959. That's what you want?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Student leader Buford Gibson, they challenged male students to rise up in protest and then place the protection of black womanhood in their hands. Unlike white men who historically use the protection of white womanhood to inspire mob violence, Gibson's speech inspired students at uh, Florida A&M to maintain their nonviolence demonstration. 2 days after the rape of Betty Jean Owens on May the 4th, 1959, the bloated body of Mac Charles Parker was found floating in the Pearl River in Poplarville, Mississippi. Parker had been charged with kidnapping and raping a 24-year-old white woman who could barely identify him in the police lineup. White men used the protection of womanhood as justification for the brutal beating and lynching of Mike Charles Parker, removed, removed from his jail cell 2 days before the trial. Why are, okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Why are white men inspired to mob violence when they feel white women have been assaulted in some way, but black men appear not to be? In our desire to keep black men alive, black women um, been complacent and happy and emasculate black men by encouraging them to temper their righteous. Okay.
Thank you. Now, y'all know I was just being provocative there.
Yeah, no. It's,
Huh?
it's interesting. Reading, well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Um, Again, when you look at, this, I mean, I'm looking at, people, people that's in power. I mean, if you remember the history back in the '60s, black folk burned half the country down at certain incidents, that happened. So, Rodney King comes to mind as well. But I think mob violence, the people that are in that, that use mob violence, the white men when it comes to the white women, blah, 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 they are the people in power, and they know if they go and lynch somebody, it's nothing going to happen because they're in
Right,
power. You know
right,
what I mean? So,
right,
black people, we go out there and we go out there and we go and have mob violence. It's, the violence is just going to get more people killed. So you're looking at people that are in power,
right,
and you know that nothing is gonna happen to them,
right,
So when you're a minority, in my opinion, you use the system as flawed as it is, to try to make that particular to make the change. And a lot of people agree with it, a lot of people don't. But
yeah.
you know,
That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. Anybody else have a comment on that one?
Well, first, I don't think that white men really have a. I don't think white men really care about white women being assaulted in some way. In terms of in this context, I think that that was used as a excuse to be as violent as they were, like blacks being less than to excuse race to excuse slavery.
Hmm.
It's not necessarily the truth, but it was a good way to explain, why white people felt they had the right to enslave other people.
Right.
So that's one. So in some ways, I can't really say that black men don't appear to be as outraged as white men, because white men's outrage has little to do with white women and more to do with power to me. Um, but I do think that we do have a desire, at least me speaking personally, to make sure that black men, aren't angry when we see it. We try to calm them down. But I don't think that's out of emasculation. I think that for me, it's out of fear of something that could happen to them. Because of the stereotypes around it, the angry black woman and the angry hypersexual beastly black man, and our way to protect them from being hurt, we tell them to be quiet. And I think we just internalize. I think that's one of the ways that we've internalized a lot of, like I said a few weeks ago, racist messages that we've been given. We want that. We know the politics of flexibility. Don't be angry because people might not like you. You're black. You can't really do that. So that's my take.
Thank you. Georgette?
Well, I think Joel and Randie's comments were very right on point about power, and then your learned behaviors. The mob violence, groups of white men did it because there were no consequences. Whatever the reason, they decided, they wanted to go out and cause havoc and kill people, lynch folks, and burn up stuff and blow up people.
Right.
In some kind of sick way, perhaps it helped them feel more validated as the people in control, more manly. And just as Randie said, the complicity of black women, not so much as trying to emasculate the black man, but at learning that the male that stood up got hammered down, or killed or imprisoned. They wanted to keep their male members of the family, people they love, their sons alive long enough to enjoy whatever life they could in the conditions that were available to them. So, and then those points in time where we do see, us all letting go and righteous anger on our side of it, that we had more severe consequences than the mob who was in power. So
Right.
then we were feeding back into the stereotypes of all those black savages or what of those angry black people. Why can't they just be calm and they can't accept anything? What are they so mad about? Because of course they don't understand. They understood when they were mad, but they didn't understand when we were mad and wanted to be violent, do it physically.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I don't think I have anything to add to that point, so I'm going to read the next section. The accelerating media coverage, student-led protests, and a threat to boycott classes forced Circuit Judge W. May Walker to call a special session of the grand jury on May 6, 1959. Students packed the courthouse and gasped when all four men pleaded innocent after their previous confessions. For the first time in Florida history, a judge sent the white defendants charged with raping an African American woman back to jail to await their trial. Justice was the last thing the black community expected. In the 34 years since Florida began sending convicted rapists to the electric chair instead of the gallows, the state had electrocuted 37 African Americans charged with raping white women. Before this, Florida had led the country in per capita lynchings. surpassing notoriously violent states like Mississippi, Georgia, and Louisiana. From 1900 to 1930, white Floridians lynched 281 people, 256 of whom were African American. Throughout its history, Florida had never executed or lynched a white man for raping a black woman. Florida's violent history included the Little Scottsboro case involving Samuel Shepard, Walter Irvin, and Charles Greenlee, black men accused of raping a white woman in Groveland, Florida in 1949. After the SCOTUS overturned their guilty verdicts in 1951, Sheriff Willis McCall decided to take justice into his own racist hands and said he killed the sons of bitches. Both the Little Scottsboro and the Beard cases revealed the extent to which the protection of white women served as the ultimate symbol of white male power and the foundation of white supremacy. When African Americans in Tallahassee demanded equal justice for Betty Jean Owens, that foundation began to crumble. So we see Florida has quite a history of racism and has been a place where the black man or woman need not expect justice. Currently, Marissa Alexander faces a 60-year sentence for shooting a gun in the direction of the man who abused her. No one was hurt. Should the black community demand and expect justice for Marissa? Is everybody familiar with the Marissa Alexander situation?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Okay. So, so what do you think? Should we be doing more to fight for her? Should we be surprised that this is happening to her in Florida, the same place where Trayvon Martin was killed, and where what's that guy Zimmerman was able to stand his ground?
Well, I know personally, I didn't find out about the case until after Trayvon Martin's, um, after George Zimmerman's murder. Verdict. Um, and I remember by that point, I was like, I can't do this. Like, I think that I think that's generally how it was for a lot of people because her case was not as publicized as Trayvon's murder, mainly
Right.
because his parents really put his murder in the forefront. They really demanded national attention, and so her case kind of went to the wayside while everyone else was focused on Trayvon. And by the time his verdict came out, and I had learned that she was also in jail because of a stand your ground law, and that the judge was, that all she did was give a warning shot, because she was being abused. I know for me, I was just like, I don't even know what. I don't like. By that time, I was just done. I think that was a general reaction for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I know that for Harriet had been posting articles about it. Black Women's Blueprint had been posting articles about it in terms of updating us about what was going on with her case. But I think everybody felt a little hopeless by that point. At least that was the general consensus in my house. Nobody
Mhm.
knew what to do, especially because, like I said, her case wasn't as publicized. So by the time, it should have been, it wasn't. And I think people just, I don't know, not stopped caring, but got numb. I don't know, and
Mhm.
didn't want to
Mhm.
talk about, just thought that it was going to end up just how George Zimmerman's trial ended up, which is a shame. Doesn't make it right, but I think that's where everybody was.
Interesting. Georgette?
Well, I agree with a lot of the points that Randie you said, and I also think it was also because we classify this as another black on black crime, and there's also domestic violence involved. And we were fatigued because the media had put, media and everyone involved we were inundated with Trayvon Martin, and emotionally and psychologically. And so when Marissa Alexander, when that started, started seeing articles about her case, well, at first, immediately we want to say, well, what was she doing with a gun around a baby? We're immediately blaming the victim again. That was a lot of mindsets. That was, you'd see that in media. But going back to the question, should we still demand and expect justice for her? Of course, we should still demand it. The problem is getting people together to do that or continue to participate and still feel motivated to participate and care about her really receiving justice. And I think that's another thing that happens, when you see these cases, they're drug out for so long that we just get tired, and then we're caught up in our lives so much that then we just hope that the legal system will do the right thing. We hope she'll have a good lawyer. We hope the jury will see truth as we see it.
Right. Yeah, I was. It started out being 20 years that she was facing, and I was shocked recently. I was working on a project and I looked up something about her, and currently the prosecutor is seeking 60 years. Um, so it's going from bad to worse, but I think that the points that Randie and Georgette have raised are really interesting. Joe, did you want to weigh in on this one?
Yes, ma'am. What struck me about the particular case, not only stand your ground, but often I wonder uh, where are the white feminists when it comes to cases like this particular case?
Right.
Where are the advocates for women's rights and the ones that you will see come out of the woodwork when other women of non-color, when they have domestic violence? Where are these people at? And I think a lot of times when you look at the feminist movement going back to the 20s and whatnot, when you talk about economics, when you talk about rape, when you talk about globalization, a lot of times, in my opinion, what you see is you see Caucasians smashing the glass ceiling, but they forget about the person that's working in Walmart. You forget about the other person in the domestic violence. Here, down here in South Carolina, not per capita, but we have more women dying of domestic violence than any other country, any other state in the union. You
Wow.
know, yeah, but, I mean that's white women and black women. Why? Because it's a thing of power. The courts don't want to put white men in jail for domestic violence, and you see it all the time. And they lead the country in domestic murder by white men
Mm.
on white women in domestic violence. It's all over the place here. They did a piece on Al Jazeera, came down to Horry County about domestic violence here in South Carolina. So I look at the feminists. Where are the Caucasian women and sisterhood when it comes to this particular case and any other case when it comes to domestic violence? So I like to take things, let's look at it from not just, what's happening to, how's this a social issue and how are the women, yet again look at the justice system, you know,
Mhm.
where's the where's the justice when it comes to that, not just from a black perspective, but for women period. And where are the white women when one of the sisters in the sisterhood of African Americans are being uh, having issues as well?
That's a great question. That's a great question. Yeah. And also Georgette's point about looking at this on as a black on black crime. I do think there's something different. Basically all of the stories that we're reading about in this book that involve rape are white men raping black women and girls. Um, and I do think something, different happens um, when it's one black person doing something atrocious to another black person, or as in the case of Marissa, it doesn't generate our outrage in the same way. Um, but I also thought it was really interesting what Randie said about the fatigue, because I just really have assumed that the lack of activism around Marissa had more to do with the fact that she was a female and Trayvon was a male. Um, than anything else. But you guys are right. There really are a lot of different dynamics there. We see George Zimmerman as a white man killing a black man. Um, you know, so yeah, a lot of different ways to look at it. Why don't we move on? Whose turn is it to read? Is it your turn, Joe?
Well, if you say it is, I guess it is.
I say it is.
Okay. Okay, politicizing the personal. News that four white men will be prosecuted created an opportunity for blacks and white liberals and conservatives to politicize this deeply personal event, rape. White women spoke openly of their fear of retaliation by the black beast rapists. Black leaders like Elijah Muhammad placed the case within the larger dialogue about the power struggle between black and white men. Eli Baker let it be known that the Negro leaders all over the South will be carefully watching the development of the case. Martin Luther King Jr. used it as a way of calling on the federal government to point this that is preached and this cold war rhetoric. Queen Mother Moore, who had petitioned the United Nations Human Rights Convention in 1957 and 1959, demanded just demanded justice Department's assistance for the Betty Jean Orange rape case and FBI investigation of the Matt Charles Parker lynching and basic voting rights. Is okay. In what ways does the value of philosophy of individualism render what could be seen as a political problem personal?
Yeah, I think that's my favorite question of the night. So let me tackle that one first. Um, one of my pet peeves or great concerns is that the world we are living in has become so individualistic um, that that's especially a real problem, I think, for black people. Um, it might be okay to be individualistic if you have power, if you have money, if you have resources. Um, but I think that when you don't, um, or when you have less, um, that that it's really detrimental to our community to take on this value around individualism. And so rape is a really personal problem. I mean, I love the quote that Patricia Stevens Dew said in this chapter. You know, it was as if we had all been raped, because I think when we allow ourselves to feel um, someone else's pain, then it pushes us to action or activism. It turns on our collective strengths. Um, but when we define each problem as that's your problem, um, then if it's your problem, then there's no reason for me to do anything about it. So you know, it's. I really wanted to ask that question, I guess, because you know that's just a ongoing concern of mine, and I'm wondering if you guys have any thoughts about it.
Well, I agree. I think that not only have people become more individualistic, we want instant gratification, and we lack a lot of compassion and empathy that we used to have. Um, I find a lot of black people to be more apathetic than usual in terms of reading this book and just a lot of history in general, and just thinking about my grandparents and great grandparents, and I think that comes from a deep sense of fatigue as well. So we have to acknowledge like what drives people to stop caring and to demand individualistic ideals, and I think it can be used as a defense mechanism. People's fight or flight kicks in and they choose flight, and because it's easier. And I think it's hard to be compassionate about everything, and so people just tend not to be about everything, and that's where you get the I'm neutral, I'm colorblind, let's just stop talking about it. It's not just about race. Let's take race out of it. Those people like that suffer from some type of trauma or fatigue, I believe. Doesn't make it right, but I do think there are some underlying reasons of why we have become this way. I think a lot of people are also though recognizing that being that way is not healthy and it's not really fixing anything. And it's a shame that we have to have one of our brothers or uncles or sisters get raped or killed before we wake up and recognize that that these individual problems are human rights concerns and issues. But for whatever reason, people need to learn by demonstration. And I think that in terms of the Hobby Lobby thing going on, the Voter Rights Act, all of this is going to make people realize this individual crap is not working. So I think eventually it'll turn around.
I hope you're right.
Me too.
Georgette?
Wow, Randie did such a great job of that.
She did.
Everything. That was beautiful.
Randie says she's not going to be with us next week. I miss her already.
Oh my
I know. I'm sorry. I'm going to a concert.
Who are you going to see?
Beyonce.
Who else?
Okay. Well, we try to hold it down without you, but I don't know.
Joe,
Yes, ma'am.
did you have any thoughts about our individualism?
When Martin Luther King had a holiday, I always got a thought. Well, I think, in my opinion, when I look at individualism, the first thing I think about is people that want to use individualism. They can very easily minimize the particular problem. Is there, have a question, say, well, is it really a problem? Is it an isolated incident? let's do a study. Oh, it's so complicated. It's convoluted. You know, and I believe that individualism as a for a group of people. If you remember, yeah, I'm 53, so I can remember the extended family in the African American community opposed to the nuclear family. The nuclear family, the individualism, it puts people on the hamster wheel a lot quicker. That may not even be ready to be put on the hamster wheel. It may put, the great grandparent or the grandparent in the nursing home. It keeps you from collectively
Right.
pooling resources. It makes black men and black women feel that I am not um, productive because I still live with my parents. I'm 25 years old, even though I am trying to get a footing in a capitalistic society and I'm not ready to go out. When I've been to Germany, and I know they live with their parents till they're 30 or 35 years old, and the parents stay with the children or the children stay with the family to collectively. And, we bought into the Western society. So individualism is a part of capitalism and which is a part of our society to keep us on the hamster wheel. I don't want to sound like it's rhetoric. You understand what I'm saying? This is
It makes
my,
sense to me.
you know what I mean? When I do things like this, I like to look at not from the standpoint and going what Randie said, not to minimize the race issue, not at all, but I always like to look at capitalism is about capitalism. It don't care who it crushes. If racism is what keeps capitalism alive, let it be racism. If individualism is what keeps capitalism alive, let's use that. If it means whatever, just keep the hamster on the wheel.
Right. It's very effective.
So
Yeah.
I look at individualism as a way to minimize the problem.
Mhm. Mhm. That's a good way of thinking about it. Randy, why don't you read the next section?
Okay. Uh, Sandra Brown, 1959, Style and Robert F. Williams, local NAACP president, Monroe, North Carolina. Robert F. Williams, local NAACP president in Monroe, North Carolina, who led the defense in the 1958 kissing case, insisted that African Americans stand their ground and defend themselves. Nevertheless, he persuaded a group of angry black women to let the courts handle the case of Lewis Medlin, a white mechanic who attempted to rape Mrs. Mary Ruth Reed, a pregnant black sharecropper, in front of her 5 children, instead of the machine gun approach they favored. When Medlin was found not guilty after a 10-minute trial, the black women with Williams were furious and blamed him for not allowing them to mete out the justice Medlin deserved. We cannot rely on the law, Williams said to reporters at the Medlin trial. We get no justice under the present system. If we feel that injustice is done, we must right then and there on the spot be prepared to inflict punishment on these people. If it's necessary to stop lynching with lynching, then we must be willing to resort to this method. This comment set off a national controversy, and at the 1959 NAACP convention, President Roy Wilkins suspended Williams for his stance. We as men should stand up as men and protect our women and children, Williams said to NAACP delegates. Do you agree or disagree with Williams' stance? What impact does it have on society when the system of justice does not operate in a fair manner? Mm, mm,
Well, I'll say
uh,
I'm exercise my Second Amendment rights myself, so whatever.
Huh?
I exercise my Second Amendment rights. Okay, you walk through these doors, you got a problem. That's all I'm saying.
You agree with William.
I mean,
uh,
I served in the military for 22 years. I'm a law-abiding citizen, but the world just ain't built that way no more.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
um,
Randy?
well, uh, I can see why he felt that way, and sometimes reading this book, I feel that way. But I think that at the end of the day, this lynching that they would have, if they, if people would have been down for it, I don't think it would have happened at all. I think the passive and aggressive um, white men and white mob violence, because it wasn't just white men who went to these lynchings, it was women and children as well. I think that there just would have been another race riot that year, honestly. And I think that black people would have lost, because we've seen time and time again that white people can kill without indictment and black people cannot. And I think that the NAACP could have handled it differently, and don't remove him from it, but then that's them doing their respectability politics again. Um, but I think that he spoke out of anger, and he really didn't. He forgot how chaotic this time was and how unfair and ruthless the system was. I don't think the lynchings would have went through even if people had been on his side. I think that it would have just been another race riot of white people killing black people.
Yeah. I have y'all ever read the book The Spook Who Sat by the Door?
I saw the movie.
Yeah, I just watched the movie myself again the other night. I think it was on YouTube or Netflix or something. But it's basically about a black guy who is the first black person to be trained as a CIA agent,
Mhm.
and he takes his job real seriously, and he's the best at, in all these different areas, and um, he stays with them for I think 5 years and puts up with the racism, the little snidey comments and whatnot. And finally he leaves and he goes back to his hometown, and he takes a job which is really a cover as the head of a social service agency. But in the meantime, he is undercover training, all of these black men in guerrilla warfare. And they're going around and robbing banks and, amassing resources. And it's just a feel good movie. Isn't it?
It is.
Because the thing is, when you can't count on the justice system, when the justice system is clearly unfair and you're on the short end of the stick, then it really does push you to start thinking about, well, what am I going to do? How do I get justice? Nobody wants to just be kicked around, slapped around, beaten on as they move through this world. We have a human right to expect a certain level of safety and security and justice. And so when we don't get justice in our legal system, and quite honestly, there's been very little justice for black people in this country. Um, it does create a motivation to seek justice in other ways. So from my perspective, it would behoove all Americans to want to have a just justice system, because I think when you don't, you have people out there who are actually a threat, who are actually potentially planning guerrilla type activities to get the justice they could not get um, in the main system. So,
Well, you know, if I may, I believe that, not necessarily like the man said in 1958, 59, the NAACP. Um, I think every individual have a right, every group of people have a right to protect themselves. That's in reason, especially when you don't have a system. If I'm out on, I travel up and down the highways all the time, and if I'm out on the highway, if you as American citizens, as women, if you travel around and you know how the world is, even though my my desire is to live in harmony and to flee a situation, I have the obligation to protect my own life and those whom I love. So therefore, I am given that particular right by the amendment to the Constitution. So, you know, I'm like everyone else here. I want to live, and so if I'm out on the highway, I can't count on the justice system that's going to protect me when I travel through Georgia, Alabama, and places like that. And I have to protect myself until I'm going to be, you know, judged by 12 and carried by 6. Something like that.
yeah, yeah. Georgette, anybody else?
Well, I just want to say that I agreed with William's stand, and I love that straight gangster attitude of those ladies.
Yeah, those are my kind of women.
And, the incidents that have happened in the book so far,
Yeah,
you feel some kind of way about it.
yeah.
And to- thinking back to, my education in public school and Catholic school, and I never heard anything about people, black people standing up and wanting to resist in the South. It was always, oh, they just took it. And then there was, I grew up in Newark, New Jersey,
Hmm.
so there's always
Oh,
this
you
noise.
did?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, I was in Newark for a long time.
Oh, you were okay. So, all right, well, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
But there's always this idea, or that when growing up, that the people who stayed in the South, they were meek, they were docile, they just took it, and the people in the North would say, oh, well, if that had happened to me, well, I'd have just shot whomever. But it's not, that's not what happened. And in order to achieve the success that they did, to get you to the point where you could say in the North, oh, I'd have just shot someone, they had to use people and these women with this more aggressive style, as, and I think this could not be, but this is just my opinion, that the NAACP president said, well, look at Williams there. He wants to do an eye for an eye. Do we want a race right, or do you want to come over here and talk and let's discuss it and do, try a more political, legal approach? What do you want to do here? Which one will be more successful without getting a whole lot of people killed? So
Hmm. Hmm.
that's the only point I wanted to add.
Okay, thank you. You want to go on and read the next section, Georgette?
Okay. Betty Jean Owens faces her attackers in court, June 12, 1959. At least 400 people witnessed Betty Jean Owens face her attackers in court on June 12, 1959, including hundreds of white people. She testified to the sordid details of her gang rape that lasted 2 to 3 hours, as well as the physical injuries she sustained and depression she experienced as a result. Defense attorneys attempted to prove she consented or that she enjoyed the rape. She showed signs of anger when Williams repeatedly asked if she was a virgin, attempting to characterize her as a stereotypical black Jezebel. Owens retained her composure, refused to answer questions about her chastity, and resisted efforts to shame her. Are you going to believe this nigger weep over these 4 boys? Screamed defense attorneys Howard Williams to the jury during his summation. Betty Jean Owens didn't have a chance in the world, countered prosecutor William Hopkins, with 4 big boys, a loaded gun, and a knife. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury foreman, Local plantation owner A.H. King announced the verdict, guilty with a recommendation for mercy. Mercy meant these white men would not have to face the electric chair and made it inescapably clear that the death penalty for rape is only for colored men accused by white women, as the Baltimore Afro-American put it. On June 21st, they were sentenced to life in prison.
Let's just look at the first question.
What kind of sick bastard would suggest someone enjoyed being raped? Wow, don't we hear that all the time in these cases?
Yeah.
Yes.
Otherwise.
Yes. Oh, I don't know. Randie, why don't you read the next section, please?
Okay. Reaction to the verdict. Black people in Tallahassee resented the fact that the rapist had not been sentenced to death. Betty Jean Owens was grateful 12 white men believed the truth, but wondered if things would have been different if one of our boys raped a white girl. In letters to the editors of many black newspapers, people condemned the two young black men who were forced to leave the scene of the crime, and all black men for failure to protect black women. Some blacks like C.K. Steele and Roy Wilkins saw the verdict as a victory. Others saw it
Can you all hear
as a
Randie?
way to argue that some black men
There's a little
have been
delay.
to their places.
Yes.
One second. Can you hear me now? Hello? Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. It's just a little delay, but we hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
They expressed their fears, concerns, and racism in letters
Okay,
to
now we
the
can
judge.
hear you.
Okay. Despite segregationist efforts to maintain the status quo, the conviction signaled an enormous break with the past. While the verdict was due largely to the confluence of localized issues, a politically mobilized middle-class African-American community, the lower-class status of the defendants who were politically expendable, Florida's status as a moderate southern state depended on outside tourism and media pressure. The case itself was rooted in a decades-long struggle for black women's bodily integrity that had far-reaching consequences. Like the Reese Taylor case, the Tallahassee case focused national attention on the sexual exploitation of black women by white men. The life sentence helped secure convictions elsewhere that summer. Share our further history of the South for raping a 47-year-old African-American woman. Do you want me to read the question, Michelle? Michelle?
Yeah, just in case anybody wants to say something about it.
How did you feel?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. I can hear you. Michelle,
Okay.
how did you
Okay,
feel?
yeah, just read the question.
Okay,
Yeah.
how did you feel about the verdict?
Okay, did anybody want to say something about, does anybody want to say something about that question?
Can you hear me, Michelle?
I hear you, Randie.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
There's a delay going on.
I don't
Yeah.
know why.
Yeah, I don't know. Georgette, you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you fine. And
Okay. It happens sometimes. Did anybody have a reaction to the verdict?
well, I thought
Well,
it.
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
All right. I thought it was well surprising because we expected them to do what they normally do and let the perpetrators walk, but which they sort of did. And the penalty for rape is death, which is something, we don't have today, I don't think. Do we have that in any of our states?
Not that
I
I know
don't
of.
know.
I doubt it.
What do you say now?
Do we have the rape penalty, the death penalty for rape?
No, the death penalty is no longer for rape. No.
Wow.
Right.
Well, you can only get the death penalty for murder. I had my great uncle in Greenville, South Carolina. That's where my family's originally from. I looked it up. He was sentenced to death in South Carolina for allegedly raping a white woman.
Wow.
And I looked it up. His name is in the book. I forget his name. I'll tell y'all later. But, yeah.
Oh, it's in the book we're reading?
No, it's in the books down here of electrocutions in South Carolina.
Wow. Wow. Georgette, were you finished?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Go ahead, Joe.
I feel sick about, of course, the rape, but I feel even sick about the death penalty because I feel some kind of way about that anyway. You know what I mean? But that's a full number.
Okay. Randie?
Well, I guess it was a good deal that they was afraid that if they got out, they would pursue her, and one of the men did, but he killed and raped the wrong woman. I don't know if y'all remember that part in the chapter.
Yeah. Yeah.
He got out, so it's very clear that to be black and and to rape a white woman, you would have died, and white men just didn't have that same punishment. So that was troublesome, but I didn't expect them to give them the death penalty. I didn't. So I wasn't necessarily surprised, but I was mad I wasn't surprised. But I was happy that they did get a verdict, because it did convince the world that black women are women and worthy of protection. Though we shouldn't have to argue that, but this country,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay. Where are we on time? We have just a few minutes left. We only have one section left. Let me read that one. Patricia Stevens Dew organized Tallahassee's first core chapter just 6 weeks after the trial. That fall, family students launched a sit-in campaign. A year later, they successfully desegregated local lunch counters in the spring of 1960. The sit-in movement spread rapidly after students in North Carolina demanded service at a Woolworth's counter on February 1st, 1960. By the end of February, black college students had launched sit-ins in 31 cities in 8 states across the South. During the next 3 years, the nation and the world witnessed African Americans risking their lives for human rights during the Freedom Rides in 1961. Watched Bull Connor unleash snarling police dogs on black children during the Birmingham movement in 1963, heard about Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream at the Lincoln Memorial, and saw investigators pull the bodies of 3 voter registration workers out of an earthen dam in Philadelphia, Mississippi in 1964. African American women made up the bulk of the 257 Florida A&M University students who were arrested for protesting segregated movie theaters in Tallahassee in the spring of 1963. The Tallahassee verdict proved that a new day had dawned in the South, but it was not yet a new world. During the 1960s, black women, particularly voting rights activists, remained vulnerable to rape and sexualized violence. especially in places where television crews and NAACP organizers could not go, private homes and prison cells. And so the question for that is it likely that any population group other than students would be the ones to lead social activism? Why or why not?
Mm,
Um,
I think that it is likely, but I think that students have less to lose, which is why we find ourselves so active. We're in school. Like I was on scholarship. I didn't really have, I didn't have children. I'm not married. Me being, me marching doesn't really affect my income, because I'm in college. I think we have a lot more freedom. It seems, and the more time, because colleges are considered so liberal, especially if you go to a liberal arts school, and because that's usually where activism, if you go to college, is awakened in college, and so people just, I think, would just kind of expect us to do something because not saying that we don't really do anything, but we go to school, we go to class, but I think if there's a time for you to make a stand in your early 20s is a time to do it. Like a lot of the greats did. Angela Davis, Stokely Carmichael, they were all young. They were all in their early 20s when they started when they identified as activists and when they went on to forums and rallies and stuff. So I think it's normal. I just I think it's
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody else?
yeah, I believe that. I think Renee, she said something earlier. I think it's more likely. It's more likely not that other social populations are activists other than young people because older people have, like when they say they have a fatigue about them, they have more to lose, and um, the frontal lobe on young people is not yet developed, and they don't understand the consequences of their actions when they do act, when they are activists. You know what I mean? They don't.
Yeah.
They just do it because they're full of ideas. They're fed up with the hypocrisy of the older people, and they see the injustices. They see the war. They see the planet is going down. They say, "Let's do something about it," and that's what young people do. They do something about it, whereas we as older people, we just want to retire. We just want our paycheck. That's for somebody else to worry about.
Yeah. Georgette?
Well, yeah, I agree with both Randy and Joel. I wish there there could be, another population group that could be so ready to respond wherever the need arose to speak up and put their bodies in front of, uh,
Bullets.
whatever, bullets, tanks, bombs, and there are, I'm sure, you go back to China, Tiananmen Square, and Egypt, the Arab Spring, uh,
Mm-hmm.
but
Occupy.
yeah, right, and Occupy, and then on that point with Occupy stuff, how we saw them be destroyed. And I don't know if that was from the inside out or the outside in, but the movement, we had a lot of people attacking them. Well, I'm not going to join unless I know where they stand. Did they have to stand for a specific thing? We got so many things wrong going on in the world. We can stand against everything that's wrong. And so I think a lot of people are ready to commit, that way.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Okay.
Even the movement that's in North Carolina with Moral Monday, even though they're showing the face of, it's interesting. I'm interested in it because I am from North Carolina. I actually grew up 30 miles from Monroe, but the
Oh.
with the voting rights that's in the court in Atlanta right now, the federal court in Atlanta right now, about what's going on uh, with the Voting Rights Act. But the Moral Mondays was started by a student in North Carolina. You know, that movement, the whole Moral Monday movement was started by a student.
And who is it? The Dream Defenders. You know, it tends to. Usually you will find students at the forefront of of activist movements. Um, anyway, you know, tonight was a little bit weird without Benita and Labib, but you know, we are so grateful that you showed up, Joel, and like the rest of us, I see you don't have any problem coming up with opinions. So you fit in with this group quite nicely. Um, so let's look at moderators. Why don't we just figure out who are going to be the moderators for the rest of the session? We have chapter 6. Well, I want to do chapter 8.
Is
And
there a chapter?
yeah,
Because
chapter, huh?
oh no, I'm gonna look again. I'm sure it is. I probably just went through the pages quickly, but I just thought I saw chapter 7 and then acknowledgments. I didn't see chapter 8.
Yeah, chapter 8 and the epilogue. I want to do those together. Um, so we need somebody for 6 and 7. And Randie, you're not going to be here next week, so it won't be you, right?
Right, but I can do 7.
Okay. Georgette, can you take 6?
Sure, I'll take 6. I'll take it.
Okay. Unless you just want to do it, Joel. Do you want to do it, or you want to wait until we get to our next book?
I will take it to the next one.
How did I know that? All right, so Georgette chapter 6, Randie chapter 7, and Michelle chapter 8. And somewhere in the next week or so, I'm going to try to put up a survey someplace so we can vote on the next book. There are a bunch of different suggestions there. On the community page at Google Plus. So, you know, try to let me know what books we should put on the survey, what you're most interested in. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Then I think we're done. Does anybody have any final comments you want to make?
Thanks for letting me be a part of the group. Randie, I don't hear who you're going to go see, but enjoy your concert.
Beyonce.
So Beyonce,
She's gonna have a good time.
Yeah, I will. I'm so excited. I really am.
All right, all right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Georgette, as always, it's a pleasure. And I will see you next Tuesday, 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. Are you going to come back, Joel?
yes, ma'am.
Oh.
All right. Looking forward to it. All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye.